Welcome back, Sister Wives Now, because what transpired in this moment was not only awkward, not only uncomfortable, but by no means was it the apology that Kody Brown has been presuming it to be. It was instead a slow-motion collision of ego and accountability. And this was the first time that Kody found himself not standing in front of a wife who had been conditioned to take the emotional brunt, but in front of the husband of his wife, David, who, in a quiet voice that did not rise, did not threaten, did not intimate, but simply said the one thing that Kody never wants to hear, the one thing that explodes his insulated world. And that is that the real damage was not between the two people who had long since moved on. It was between the father and his children. The scene begins with an almost palpable tension, like the performance of a line memorized in the mirror. All smile, all graces, all appearance of constructed peace. We've all moved on. We're good. We're gonna shake hands, be friends. But then, the word, the pause, the hesitation, hope, is heard even before anything can respond. Hope is not an expression of humility, but an expression of doubt. An expression of a man questioning a room full of people to see if he still has a place, still generates awe, still revolves around the access he holds. But when David calmly asks him why this needs to be questioned, why this needs to be a hope, when everyone has moved on, Kody does not lean in. He pulls back because this was a performance, not a discussion. And that's where the dynamics change in a way that was obvious to the audience. Christine is not an emotional person. She's not a reactive person. She's not a person looking for validation. She's a person who is settled and grounded and has a clear sense that any kind of healing she was going to take care of was something she could take care of a long time before she settled into another marriage, and does not in any way fit the story that Kody is trying to tell about himself, and that is that he is the beneficent gatekeeper of closure, and that man grants permission for happiness. And that's why this apology is so out of place, because it's not something that is asked for. It's something that is imposed on a person who has already shut the door. David's presence is important in this regard, not as someone whose word overshadows the dialogue in the room, but as the only one not participating in the drama unfolding before the cameras. And when he is able to shift the attention away from himself towards the kids right away, when he says exactly what the viewing audience has been shouting at the screen for years now, that the true work has to be between Kody and the kids just for a second. You get the sense of things shifting, because Kody doesn't react in a thoughtful manner. Instead, he acts in an irritated fashion, as if being called on by the kids is somehow inconvenient. In fact, Kody chooses instead to affirm that his mission and goal here is to apologize to Christine alone, and not David or anybody else, because just the fact that this is what his mission and goal are shows the conflict, because Kody has already determined what the ramifications of this exchange will be, and attempts at deviating from it, or at least attempts at suggesting that Kody owes a responsibility somewhere else, get erased immediately beneath the commentary that erupted on social media, as people pointed out things like, why apologize for what she doesn't care about when ignoring the kids who are suffering? And this seems like image repair instead of a genuine apology, because it definitely seems like it. Kody starts what many people will realize is a typical pattern for him as the discussion proceeds, reminiscing about the past with a glimmer of rosy-tinted nostalgia, looking back on the relationship as though it was somehow mystical and lovely, as though going back in time and trying to rewrite history might just mend the present. Christine doesn't react, doesn't respond. But Kody gets more and more angry, because truly there is nothing more frustrating for a man who lives on reaction than a boy that just sits there quietly ignoring him. And just as Kody's anger becomes noticeable, because clearly this is a man who wants the world to understand him, when David intervenes firmly but respectfully, again on behalf of the children. Social media exploded with comments about this scene, with people talking about the hypocrisy of him telling everyone to honor his boundaries while not honoring everyone else's, with him asking for peace while not being receptive to hearing why what he is doing is problematic, both to them and to him, with him interpreting accountability as an attack while he narrowly refuses to admit he doesn't care what anyone else wants, by saying he doesn't want to hear about certain things because he gets angry with people being reminded of them. But That one quote was enough to go viral itself because that sums up the entire problem. A man who wants to have conversations that make him feel good is not looking for a resolution to a conflict. He's looking for a way to exert control over a situation. But then comes the even more potent role of David here, because David does not strike back. David does not belittle. David just presents a different model of being a man, a model that is grounded in a sense of responsibility rather than power. And when David talks about his own experience with his own kids about getting into stuff and doing the heavy lifting, it reveals what's missing from Kody's table, which is humility. So David's narrative is impossible to ignore because David is speaking from his own experience. Kody does not want to hear it, not because it is bad. It's because it upends a vision that Kody holds of himself. Viewers could not help but notice how frequently Kody has a tendency to put his problematic relationships in a situation that happened to everybody. And that was just the hand each of them was dealt, and that was something that regular viewers will have recognized right away. And when David pushes back at that, even a little, not only from the perspective of the children, but the system in which those children have been raised, Kody blows that off again, saying that David does not understand polygamy and that David is the enemy. And that is a significant response. Cyber trends went bananas in this case as well when folks brought up that David's experience gives him more perspective than Kody understands, that it's possible to understand a thing without agreeing with it, that a defense for children isn't an attack on a thing either. It's a mandate, which is what makes this sit so painful to watch because it reveals a truth that can't be denied, that the women have left their drama behind in favor of a new life, but the children are left to deal with the aftermath. The longer the conversation goes on, it's evident that Christine and David are starting to get frustrated. Not because they are upset, but because they are sick of being stuck in a cycle that goes nowhere. And when the voice on the other end says simply that she is responsible for her own healing, that she does not need to be set free, that statement hit like a ton of bricks because it deconstructed the entire point of the apology from Kody. Why? And it is clear that the undertones were immediately picked up by the viewers because it simply wasn't an apology related to her freedom. Moreover, by the end of this conversation, it becomes clear that there is a discrepancy between the two sides because one side is based in reality and in the present because it values emotional well-being and boundaries, and the other side is attempting to rewrite the past in order to retroactively legitimize what's happening in the present. And this is why so many people tuned in and said it was a revelation and not just drama, because it's not a revelation of any different kind of action, but a revelation of the action people have been seeing for all the years. And while this is still echoing through the circles of social media, where fans take apart each moment, every pause, every reaction, every interruption, it is clear that it was not simply an apology that went sour. It was an exoneration pitting to value systems that are absolutely disparate, where tension did not emanate from being loud. It came from not choosing to be part of a story being spun that no longer benefits anyone else but the story's teller. If this moment made you squirm in your seat, made you pause and reflect, made you reevaluate and consider what accountability truly is and truly means, then I can tell you that you're most definitely not alone, and I encourage you to make sure this video hits that like button if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new here or a fellow learner, and engage with me in the comments below because this conversation is anything but simple. Just what makes this moment have such staying power after the conversation is over is not what is being said, but rather what is being deliberately avoided every time the attention wandered, even remotely near true accountability, because every time the emotional tide turned ever so briefly upon the children, Kody pushed against it with a "now you're being judgmental" button that every person watching caught instantly, not as a reaction, but as a known pattern that each year brings with each subsequent season of this show, because what feels less like a dialogue than a battle of wits is one side asking for accountability and being met with a demand for control over narrative. As the exchange goes on, Kody's dialogue becomes very telling, not in what it admits, but in what it fails to acknowledge, because it spends at least an equal amount of time talking about how hard things have been how misunderstood it is, how unfair it is, until it never once takes pause to consider what its absence, withdrawal, anger may be leaving in its wake for the kids standing by. And it is very striking in contrast to David's perspective, who is talking from impact rather than intention. And that's a difference that people picked up very quickly in social media circles, and it's a point they wanted to make, that you are not accountable for what you intended. You are accountable for what happens as a direct consequence of what it is you actually did. The social media response to this portion of the show escalated, with videos of this segment spreading quickly and people typing furiously away in the comment section, in particular noticing this comment that reads, "Notice how he keeps saying this situation instead of my actions." Yet this comment has clearly struck a chord because it gets at the heart of what is so intensely problematic here. The lengths of David's self-control in this dialogue become all the more conspicuous with the passing dialogue, in which he neither cuts off the other person, nor confronts Kody about being a father, nor questions his legitimacy, but simply keeps restating the same thing, that mending relationships with children takes work, not symbolic actions. But the mere fact that he keeps doing so causes Kody's body language to grow increasingly rigid, with an edge creeping into his tone, as if being told there is work to be done is itself an affront, which tells the viewer exactly where the pushback is coming from. Christine, on the other hand, stays very calm and detached, as if she's watching a whole situation that she's already processed and moved on from. And this unnerves Kody more than any anger ever could, because it represents finality. And the audience recognizes this immediately as they point out that she looks at peace and unconcerned with reopened wounds for the benefit of the other man's conscience. And it's what makes Kody's refusing to apologize for what he did so awkward, because the man he needs forgiveness from is clearly nowhere present. As the conversation spirals back around once more to the concept of boundaries, Kody reiterates that his boundaries are not being respected when there are subjects that are simply off-topic, and it is to this point that the viewer's frustration is at its peak regarding boundaries, because they are supposed to shield healing but in no way ensure accountability, and we're quick to point out the hypocrisy regarding the fact that he wanted all others to honor his emotional boundaries but ignore the emotional pains that his behaviors had created. Teasing out this moment online became even more direct, with people sharing their thoughts of parents who forgive without doing the actual work, who want the pardon without the responsibility, who view any kind of pushback as a lack of respect. And it's this kind of relatability that makes this moment so resonant, as it isn't just about a reality family but a situation that people themselves can see playing out. David's final messages come across softly but strongly, reminding his sibling that reconciliation with kids doesn't come from winning an argument or maintaining pride, but from being there despite difficulty. And this value system clearly conflicts with that of Kody's, who finds being challenged equivalent to being betrayed. And this is seen with how quickly Kody pushed away David's real-world example, with the implication that such an example could then apply to him, thereby once again refusing instead of engaging, and solidifying the perception that Kody is not listening but waiting to talk. The emotional temperature of this situation never boils over, and that's exactly what makes it so effective, as there is no shouting to muddy the meaning, no dramatic exits to change the subject, simply a gradual revelation of divergent priorities, and a discernment that as this conversation has come to a close, a resolution has not been arrived at, not out of a lack of ability to resolve it, but a lack of willingness to ingress with the humility had a situation sometimes requires. Those watching in living rooms felt a clash of emotions, anger and sadness and exhaustion, as they responded in kind to this episode, as they realized this moment finally shed a lot of light as to why there has been so little forward motion, as a function of a lack of accountability if defensiveness leads the way, and there cannot be any kind of healing if the ego is allowed to trump feel. What sticks with me the most is the contrast between Christine and David, who are living their life for the future with boundaries, with communication, with emotional intelligence. And Kody is stuck on a different way of living that was centered on unquestionable dominance and accountability not being a concern. The contrast between them is not just symbolic, It's illustrative. It shows the viewer what progress looks like and what non-compliance looks like side by side. And as the dust is settling around this encounter, one thing is evident. Apologies without action don't mend. Dialogue without listening doesn't mend. And relationships with children can't be fixed with image repair. This is a message that the viewers took away from this encounter. Not because this is directly communicated, but because this has been illustrated in every deflect and in every dismissal and in every passing opportunity to attend to that which truly takes priority. And so now I would like to turn the reins over to you, as it is clear why this conversation has engendered such passion. So please do not forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share your feedback in the comments, and click on the notification bell so you can be alerted when we release more content in the future, since it is clear that, like all of us watching, it does not finish when the camera turns off.